Welcome. Today, we are digging into a question that honestly affects pretty much anyone who's ever studied a language. And we're doing it by looking at this really fascinating study out of Vietnam. The big question is this: what do those language tests we all take actually measure? I want you to think back to the last language test you took. You get a score, right? Maybe it's a 92, maybe it's a C minus. But what does that number really tell you about how well you can use the language? Does it mean you can confidently order food in another country? Or does it just mean you're a whiz at multiple choice questions? Well, that's exactly what this study wanted to figure out. You see, the study was set in Vietnam, where teachers are up against a pretty huge challenge. Imagine you're a teacher and you have a class of 50 kids. 50! You just can't get to know each student's speaking ability one-on-one. So what do? You have to rely on formal tests. They become the main tool you have to gauge progress. But are those tools giving you the whole story? And this gets us right to the heart of what we can call the classroom testing problem. When a test is pretty much the only window you have into how a student is doing, you've got to be absolutely sure that window is showing you the right view. And that number, 50, it really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? In many places around the world, this is just normal. And it makes it incredibly hard to do any kind of real performance-based assessment. So of course, teachers lean on tests that are quick to give and easy to grade. But what's the trade-off here? So the researchers behind the study, Cheng Wen and DM Lei, they really honed in on this one critical difference. The difference between knowing a language, memorizing grammar rules and vocab lists, and the ability to actually go out and use it. And that is the mystery we're going to unravel today. Okay, so if we're going to judge these tests, we need something to judge them against, right? We need a gold standard. So what does real communication actually look like? Well, in the world of linguistics, the term for this is communicative competence. It's this big idea that it's not just about knowing the rules in a book. It's about using the language effectively, in the right situations, to actually understand people and have them understand you. It's the whole shebang. And we can break this big idea down into 4 main pillars. First up, you've got grammatical competence. You do need to know the rules and the words. But then, and this is a big one, there's sociolinguistic competence. That's knowing how to talk to your boss versus how you talk to your best friend. Then you have discourse competence, being able to put sentences together to tell a story or, write a coherent email. And finally, there's strategic competence. This is your toolkit for when you get stuck, like when you forget a word and have to describe it to keep the conversation from dying. Here's the best way to think about it. You can memorize the entire driver's manual. You can ace that written test, get a perfect score. That's your language knowledge. But that does not mean you can successfully merge onto a 6-lane highway during rush hour. That part, actually driving, that's your language ability. All right, now we have our gold standard. So let's put on our detective hats. The researchers got their hands on the actual tests these students were taking. So let's look inside and see what kind of evidence they found. So, here's a pretty typical question. Let's look at this. What is it really testing? Well, it's testing one very specific grammar rule, the present continuous tense. You either know it or you don't. It's a textbook test of grammatical knowledge. Or how about this one? A classic sentence scramble. Again, ask yourself, what are we measuring here? It's your knowledge of standard English word order. It's basically a puzzle, and there's only one right answer. It's all about form. So when the researchers analyzed a whole bunch of these tests, a very clear pattern started to emerge. They saw a heavy focus on grammar rules, memorizing vocabulary, and sentence structure. But look at the column of what's missing. That's what's really telling, isn't it? No speaking, no listening, almost no real-world use or creativity at all. So after sifting through all the evidence, all those multiple choice questions and sentence scrambles, what was the final verdict from the researchers? Their conclusion was pretty blunt. These tests overwhelmingly measure language knowledge, the memorization part. They almost completely fail to measure true communicative ability. They're testing if you pass the written driver's exam, not if you can actually drive the car. And you don't have to take my word for it. Here's a quote directly from the authors. They said the tests contained mainly technical and theoretical tasks intended to test students' memorization, not their creative application of it to communication. That kind of says it all. So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, I get it, the tests aren't great, but why is this such a big deal? Well, it matters a whole lot because this is about the difference between just memorizing stuff and actually building skills you can use in your life. And here is the absolute key. It's something people call teaching to the test. Because what we decide to test is very often what we decide to teach. If students know the test is only going to be on grammar rules, well, then teachers are going to spend most of their time teaching grammar rules. The test itself actually ends up shaping the entire way the subject is taught. So, what does a better test even look like? Well, the research points to three main things. First, it should involve meaningful communication. Maybe instead of filling in a blank, you write a short email to a friend making plans. Second, it should use authentic situations, like looking at a real train schedule and figuring out your trip. And third, and this is so important, it requires creative language output. The student has to come up with a language themselves, not just circle option B or D. And all of this leaves us with one last, really big question to think about. This study clearly shows us how some tests can create this huge gap between a student's grade and their real-world skills. But it also points to a better way. So if we can change our tests to measure what really matters, that ability to connect and communicate, could we actually shift how we teach and learn languages everywhere? If we change how we test, can we truly change how we learn?